Welcome to the Aesopians podcast, where the wisest in the channel come to get their MSP marketing insights. Today we're talking about webinar lead generation and featuring Scotty Millar of IT Rockstars. Let's hop right in. Welcome back to the Aesopians podcast. I'm here with Scott Millar from IT Rockstars, who has been a presence in the channel for a while now and has an interesting story that has ranged across a few different things and is now landed on some webinar lead generation for MSPs, which is what we're going to be kind of talking about today. So Scott, let me kick it back over to you here, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and kind of the journey to how you got to this point.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me on the show, Hunter. I really appreciate this. So, a little background on me. I used to work in an MSP, senior systems engineer. This was way back in 2011. I did that for quite a few years, and then I switched to like a salesperson. I entered the dark side. And I was in that position for about 2 years, and I was doing really well in it. It's quite a challenge to start with, like figuring out sales and stuff like that. About 2 years in, I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can get some equity in this MSP. The owner was very smart and told me no. So I said, okay, I can just go and start up my own MSP. And like I'd already seen, like basically I helped start that MSP, and there was only 3 of us in the door. And I already seen how much work's involved in like building an MSP. So 6 months into the journey of my own MSP, I kind of realized the reality is like, I don't want to do this. It's such hard work. I want to follow my passion. And one of the biggest pain points that I had when I was doing the sales role, and when I owned MSP, I only did it for 6 months, but it was finding like people that like were looking for IT services. It was easy when I was like sat down in front of them, but it was just finding them in the first place. So for the last 8 years, I've pretty much had a mission to help transform the way MSPs do their business, and I have solved that problem for MSPs. I've worked for 492 across the whole globe. So that's a little background to myself, Hunter.
Okay, yeah. So I think the Kaseya report just came out, their annual report, and sales, marketing, lead gen were once again top of the charts. I think when the market's kind of booming as it was in the pandemic, hiring and recruiting becomes the top problem, but in neutral or worse business conditions, sales and marketing always seems to kind of bubble to the top. So very timely on the episode today. And you're doing webinars now, but you've also done kind of some content membership sites and helped MSPs kind of train on the website and SEO and things like that. So you've tried a lot of different things with results in kind of different capacities, but which have led you to this. So it's not just like you kind of got into webinars out of some divine inspiration or anything like that. It's been a road of trying various things and kind of understanding what there are and what their capacity to do is. And I think webinars are a pretty classic mid-funnel / lead nurture mechanism, but you've really applied them with kind of lead generation as well. So I guess tell us a little bit more about that, kind of what the offer is, what you're doing with webinars, how you're promoting them, things like that.
Yeah, I'll go into a little bit more of like how I got to this place, I think, if that's okay. Yeah. So you're right. I wouldn't say I've tried everything. I've accomplished a lot in the market. And as I say, I've worked with over 492 MSPs at the time of recording. And it's just been a natural progression. I'm very focused on the content side of things for a number of years, and that worked tremendously well. Same with the video. I've got books on these topics. But if you look at content right now, and certainly as we're recording this, everyone's drowning in content. Like there's so much of it. And like after working with all these managed IT service providers, and even when I was doing it myself, like I came to this realization. One of the first questions that I ask um, when I work with an MSP or an IT service business is like, how have you grown your business today? Like, how have you got your customers, your existing customers? And usually they tell me, oh, we've tried lots of different marketing. None of it really worked. Some of it has. They're using your service hunter. Um, but the majority, the core clientele that they've got is being built up on referrals. It's word of mouth referrals. It's people they know in their business network. And it's just that, yeah, that referral structure. That's how it's worked for like 99% of the marketplace. And I always ask this question because it allows me to reverse engineer, because really what I'm trying to figure out is like, oh, they've got this one marketing tactic that they're using, they just need to do that more. But the answer's always been it's never is. never the marketing, or it's rarely the marketing. And what the answer is yes, those referrals. So if you boil that down, like first principles logic, like Elon Musk style first principles, what is a referral? What is your business network? Well, it's relationships, yeah. And yeah, I mean, we answer that question. It's all about relationships. It's all these relationships that you have one way or another. So if you apply that, like if you look at all of the digital marketing assets and tactics that are available to you, how do you build more relationships? How can you do that via screen? Yeah, you can do that. Sure, you can do that for video. Big proponent of that. Yeah, it's very one way, and the issue with it is there's far more interesting topics than managed IT, cybersecurity. So getting the attention, very difficult for video. Getting the engagement on your video posts and things like that. So it's become, if I go back 6 years, it was really easy. If I posted up on LinkedIn a video, but now I'm lucky if I get 10 views on a video. And it's not just because I've got gray hair. It's just the topic, the subjects. There's such huge competition for that attention. So if you look at all these methods that are available to you, leveraging digital marketing, one of the ones that you can use is webinars, because that allows you to spark the relationship. Because in a webinar, it's two ways. It's not just one way. I'm hoping it's not just you presenting a slide deck. It's very much an interactive webinar where you're engaging the audience. You're asking them questions. They're asking you questions. So it allows you to initiate that spark of a relationship. The very first step, like the girl at the bar, just that very first step. And we all know, when it comes to managed IT, just like the girl at the bar analogy, you can't just go up and ask her, sign my managed service agreement, 36-month agreement. It all comes down to trust. So a webinar is the first step to building that trust. It's building that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've seen webinars do kind of big things. I worked at a enterprise content management provider for a company that resold Razorfish to the government sector, and they did webinars every single week, regardless of kind of what the attendance was. And I've seen that company, grow $30-40 million over the past like 10 years.
Wow.
And they've sold out to, a bigger private equity firm, and kind of the business has evolved, but they really got their start selling Razorfish to government organizations and running weekly webinars as part of their kind of, sales and, marketing funnel. Since then, have expanded services, deepened relationships with customers and things like that. So, and, surprisingly, there was both the, cold people who are interested. IT services is not the most interesting topic until it is the most interesting topic.
Yeah.
You got cybersecurity problems, you got technology problems, and then suddenly people, you've really got their attention. And webinar is a great way to kind of communicate the value and give people a preview into your business. So I've seen webinars do wondrous things, and know that they can, really help sell deals and, shorten sales cycles a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But I go back on that and say, you mentioned something there is like this $40 million company that you did work with. They would do a webinar. Was it every week, did you say?
Every week.
And it didn't matter on attendance.
Right.
So that's one of the three big problems with webinars, and something that maybe yourself, Hunter, or maybe your audience have experienced in doing webinars. The biggest issues with webinars is getting people to register on them, getting people to actually attend them. Like they're registered on them and they say, "Oh, this looks cool," and then the time comes around and they forget about it. It's maybe not in their calendar, or maybe it is in their calendar, but something else has come up. Or maybe they just can't be bothered. And I've seen me do this myself. I registered onto this webinar and it's like, do I really want to spend an hour in this? Nah, I'll forget it. So that attendance problem is real. And then the third thing with it is like, what do you actually sell? Like, how do you sell on a webinar? How does a managed IT service provider, what do they do in a webinar to like, yeah, cool. There's so many topics you can talk about and educate on, and there's things that your customers talk about and that like you're passionate about. But what's actually going to move the dial to get you to that next step? And I'm going to, if we look at it holistically, it's like we mentioned leads and warming a funnel, and it's maybe part of a funnel. But I'm going to go back to the relationships where it's actually just park all that marketing stuff. It's just about creating a relationship with someone, and this is becoming it's becoming self-fulfilling right now, because if you look at what's happening in the world in regards to AI, people are wanting that human connection more than ever. So
Sure.
it's about building relationships. So that's yeah. Hopefully that gives you some insight there, Hunter. But the three big problems, we can hit on them if you want. And as I say, I was myself when I was doing this. Everyone goes through this. Do a webinar, no one turns up. But guess what? You're still recording it, hopefully. That can go into your content marketing. That can be repurposed. But there's three huge problems there that I help solve. That's kind of why I'm sitting here today, and that's the big problem that I solve for many of my clients. Until you've done your first one, or even your 10th one, and you realize maybe you are getting people to your webinar. Maybe you are getting people to actually attend, but it's still not moving the dial. It's still not getting that next step and what that next step actually looks like. So yeah, that's why I help solve.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more demand for a human connection. I know we talk to prospects, that are MSPs, and I'm not going to name the agency, but we talked to several prospects that are frustrated with their marketing efforts, and they are looking for a marketing solution, but they find a lot of value in kind of the peer group and the connection that agency has, and they really want to hold on to that kind of human connection and be a part of those you know uh, essentially friend groups of their peers. That's kind of one of the stickiest parts of working with them. So that just kind of goes to illustrate the demand for some people value the kind of human connection over some of their primary outcomes. You know,
Yeah, it's not even about human connection. It's like just you go back to like how tribes worked. And it's like social proof, social evidence, and just how all that human psychology works. That's just I totally understand why. Oh yeah, there's these peer groups, and they have marketing solutions in them that maybe aren't that effective. But you know what? It doesn't matter because this is my tribe. And I'm not trying to reference anyone with that name. It's that psychology. If you look back 12,000 years ago into the past.
okay, yeah, yeah, totally. Now let's kind of dive into maybe some of the meta ads component that you have with promoting webinars. 'Cause, like you said, getting that initial attendance and registration and things like that is, one of the first challenges. Webinars do take a little bit of time to kind of put together and run. So you want to have as many people join them as possible. So maybe tell us a little bit about kind of how you're, fueling some attendance with, meta ads, and then I think you're also doing things with outreach to kind of prospect for attendees as well.
Yeah, cool. I'll give away the golden stuff here. That's cool. So like, I've got a huge email list. I've got a big audience. I've finally got over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot for me. Yeah, I've got this huge audience, but you can only tap that so much. So if you've already got a CRM and a list, you can only tap that so much when it comes to webinars. Like you can't be like just saying every couple of weeks, hey, I'm doing another webinar, come along. I'm gonna get sick of that. So how do you fill that top of funnel? And I've experimented with many types of ad platforms. I know, Hunter, you're obviously Google Ads is your thing, and I guess it's a little bit different when it comes to webinars because people aren't looking for a webinar about IT security or the latest AI topic. It's not the type of thing people would be searching on the search. So you really only got,
it would be too expensive.
Yeah,
because Google Ads like pretty high cost.
Yeah, it's just like the volume would be really low, and there'd be much big players in that space. So if you think about it, there's really only two sort of channels that you could go after from the paid, and that would be LinkedIn or Meta. And you mentioned Meta there. I'm a big fan of it. Maybe not so much Mark Zuckerberg, but I've experimented with both LinkedIn and Meta. Multiple thousands of dollars. And Meta is far more powerful than LinkedIn for the average small business. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter for an IT business. LinkedIn to me seems to be more geared towards the enterprise. And certainly if you look at your feed on LinkedIn, if you like to go on it right now, and if you look for the first promoted post, who's on there, it's probably not a small to medium-sized business. The reason for that, so for me, I'm looking at it right now. It's an insurance company called Hiscox. It's the first ad that comes up. LinkedIn is for the big boys. You need like 4 to 10 times the ad budget to advertise LinkedIn to make it effective. However,
absolutely,
and that's what I've experienced with like my own like money in doing this. I haven't used any client money for doing it because it's just crazy. So because of that, I just I really dialed it down into Meta, and Meta is very good at finding your ideal type of client. Okay, so if you're a generalist IT provider, and most of us are, okay, we admit it or not, there's maybe a few that are in dental or healthcare specifically, bigger guys. Most of us say we're into one vertical, but we're probably generalists. We'll take any business, and that's cool. But when it comes to advertising on Meta, if you can dial down to a very specific industry, very specific niche, you will find that you can get exactly who you want to your webinar. And I do this all the time for my clients and for my own business. Over time, the cost goes down. So if you're brand new to Meta, or if you've potentially been burnt in the past, you'll find that you will pay more. But over time, the algorithm, the way it works, you no longer have to put any targeting in, not even the age or the sex or any demographics or any interests. All the targeting is done in the ad creative and the landing page. Meta basically figures out through machine learning who to show the ad to, who's most likely to click on it, who's most likely to go to the landing page, and who's most likely to actually convert on that landing page and fill in the form. So with machine learning and the audiences it has, because it has like Facebook groups for like every type of industry, it already has all that data. It can go right down into that specific vertical. So what you need to be doing here is using dog whistle copy. So in your ad copy and your ad creative, calling out specifically who it is you want to come to the webinar. Okay, that is the targeting right there. Same on your landing page, and then you actually want to on your landing page. you want to filter out who it's not for. Okay. So there's types of like, we were speaking just now, Hunter, but I was doing this for you. There's types of IT businesses we don't want to come along to this, to our webinars. We don't want potentially the break fix, providers. We don't want the guys that are servicing residential IT. We're looking for, the guys that, and girls that have a managed IT service businesses. So you want to specifically say who it's for, and you want to basically spell out who it's not for. And if you're into the Dan Kennedy side of things, that's what he's all about. I mean, he in all of his content that he did over the years, you look at the really big MSP marketing companies, who actually their whole business is actually modeled on Dan Kennedy.
Okay. I'm not familiar with him, but apparently I'll have to take a look.
Magnetic marketing, direct mail, 3 pieces of mail, stamps, envelopes. Who copies that in the MSP space, or who did copy it in the MSP space? Yeah. So, but if you look at their content, it actually has a political angle to it. So it actually filters out a specific political view in the content. And this is what Dan did all the time. Now, I'm not saying we apply that here to us, because I'm happy to take on any customer. I don't care about your political views. But that's how dialed down it was. So if you can think about, okay, if you're working, let's say we're working with accountants, yeah? What type of accountants do you guys love working with? There's obviously the one-man bands. Yeah, probably you don't want to be working with them. You want to be working with 10 plus, bigger organization. But there'll be certain types of accountancy practices or tax practices that you love working with, and then there's ones that you can avoid. So if you can spell that out in your landing page, it works well. So because you need to have that filter in the copy, avoid lead forms. Make sure the ads go to the landing page. Meta will try and tempt you into getting a higher amount of people to your or converting leads. The issue with that, though, is the leads will be really rubbish, will be crap, especially in Meta, where like your grandma or your uncle can be looking in the timeline and they'll accidentally click the form that auto-populates and fills. So make sure you've got that little filter step in there for them, for a landing page. That's important, otherwise you will get a lot of junk. You'll pay a higher cost per lead, but it'll be a much better type of lead. So that answers question 1. Question 2, the organic piece. What I've found is working really well at the moment on LinkedIn. This is a new tactic to me. I've only tried it. I've tested it actually just this week. The theory was put to me by a girl called Sam here in the UK. She's like one of these LinkedIn experts. But if you create an event on LinkedIn for your webinar, and then like have your URL to your webinar, your Teams link, or whatever it might be, when you create that event on LinkedIn, you can actually invite up to 1,000 of your connections every single week to the event. So when you go into the event to edit it, to manage it, there's an option to invite, and there's like a list of all your contacts you can invite to this, and you can filter it by industry, location, all those types of filters. And as soon as I sit at my desk, I go through 100 invites, boom, 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 boom. So the one that I'm running is on Tuesday next week. I've had 5 days of doing this, and I've got over 50. It's almost at 60. It's a 57, I think, attendees coming to this webinar, because I've done this invite request thing on LinkedIn. And the only issue with it is people will see the notification to say, "Oh yeah, Scott's invited me to this webinar. It looks cool." I'll press the attend button. So they basically just have to press a little button, say they're going to attend. The issue with that, though, is it's on the LinkedIn platform. So unless they're on LinkedIn at the time the webinar's happening, they're not going to remember.
Yeah.
Luckily, you get a list of all the attendees. So as part of my morning ritual, once I've done my invites, I'll go to see who said that they're going to attend. And I just send them a little message, say, "Hey, I see you are going to you registered onto the event for Tuesday. Can you just send me your email address so that I can send you the Teams invite? Simple as that. And that means I can actually put them onto my Teams meeting or my webinar, depending on how I'm doing it. And it means there's a much higher chance of them actually coming along, and because they have the actual meeting calendar link in their calendar. So that's a little tip there, Hunter. And it's working really well. The issue with it though is that it's manual. Like you have to do this, every morning, and then do these follow-ups as well. So I'm baking this in. I've got a VA that's going to be doing it for my clients, basically, so that if I manage their webinars, they have this LinkedIn organic push as well. So you can have both the ads, and I'm happy to talk about some of the results from the ads and the organic push. But yeah, the one on Tuesday is purely organic, and it's looking good.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good lesson from the fitness industry, kind of reaching out to your engagers. I don't know if you follow any, fitness influencers or anything like that on Instagram, but if you like one of their posts, they're definitely going to reach out to you and say like, are you trying to, lose any weight, or, are you interested, it as kind of silly as it kind of is, and even, maybe a little frustrating, it does get you on people's radar, because like even if you don't necessarily want to be pitched like that, it I know it subconsciously helps me remember people if they've reached out after I've engaged with their posts, and kind of has a little bit of a stickiness to the relationship, because just getting invited to something is something that in itself helps strengthen a relationship, even if you don't necessarily, even if your prospects don't take you up on it. So yeah, the invites to the engagers, or the outreach to the engagers, like, in itself is a warm outreach, message.
It's a huge lever that I've only just learned.
Yeah, I would love to do more of that, and I can definitely see how it has some value. And I think maybe too, it might be good just to set some context for these meta ads and things like that you're running. So I think you're helping people get, roughly like $8 cost per lead, I think is what maybe you've told me in the past. Or what's like kind of a ballpark cost per lead for these webinar attendees and registrations?
That sounds like a sales call, because it's always the question. It's like, oh, what's my fee for managing the webinar? And it's like, oh, how much should I be spending on the ads, Scott? And that's something that we plan out as part of the engagement. And the reason you can't just I can't just pull it off the tip of my tongue, is there's quite a few factors that come into it. The first factor, or the biggest one, is if you've been running meta ads at all, or if you've done them in the past. Like if you've got an ad account, or if you're starting from fresh, you're going to pay, if you're starting from fresh, or if you haven't like run a meta ad in a number of years, you're going to be paying probably around about $45 per lead. And that's kind of, at the time recording, May 2026. And I've got a few managed clients like this where I'm managing their webinars and their ads. They're paying $45 per click. Yeah. But over time, over a 90-day period, that comes right down once we've pushed enough budget through the algorithm. And the algorithm, basically, the way it works, like it has to get over a learning phase. The learning phase lasts maximum 7 days, and it has to have 50 conversions within that first 7 days. If we can't meet that criteria, then it does not get past the learning. So it's important when you first start out with this, that you get past that learning phase, because then the machine learning behind the scenes can figure out exactly who to show your ads to, and it just gets better over time. So they vary completely. Like I'm working with a client right now. He's been doing webinars for the last. He's been following my content. He's in my school group, and he's been following my system, and he's been doing it for the last 3 or 4 months. So his lead costs $25 at the moment. So it's like half almost of that 45, and that's because he's been doing it for a few months. I've been doing it for 2 years. I haven't, I've learned a lot of lessons in the last 2 years of doing this. And within those lessons, one of the things that I've learned when it comes to the cost is that it does vary. But speaking from experience, and this is internal results, this is not results I've got from my clients yet, but this is where I'm going to be getting some of my best clients too. Your lead costs can get as low as $5, which is great. There are a few facets within it. It's really good, but there are a few things within that. So the first one is that even though you can get, say for example, like the best webinar I did was in December 2025. I had 81 people registered onto it. The cost for me was like $350. 30 people turned up to it. So I usually get around about 30% attendance to my webinar. And then I got 5 from it. So like 5 people took the next step. None of them bought. None of them bought. However, there was one that registered on. I didn't attend. He became a customer. So it's not always about who actually attends the webinar. It's what you do with the people that registered on, the contact information. And you have to like look at, okay, if you're getting $5 a lead, like, am I scrutinizing this list? Yes, I did. I'm like, realistically, who in here is actually a business that I want to work with? You know, looking at their website, looking at how many employees they have on their LinkedIn, the amount of revenue they're probably generating. So from that $5 per lead, it was probably more like $15 per lead, because about a third of it was probably only about 1/3 of the people that registered on were actually, you know, the right type of the business for me. But to me, $15 per lead for that ideal business that's a warm opt-in. It's not just like a list that I've downloaded or scraped from somewhere. These are people that are wanting to hear from me and they want to spend like an hour with me. I will pay that all day long for $15, you know? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's, good to also kind of set some context. Like, if you're running Google ads, you might be paying $1,000 per lead at the very, very low end. And that's with like everything dialed in. And you might be more in the 2,000 to 2,500, per range per lead for like high intent kind of, sales ready leads. So like, it's one of those things, but those are all inbound and it's kind of almost a cultural thing. So like if you're an MSP that's a little bit more of an outbound focused organization and have the tools and the, SDR outreach, or you just want to kind of be working on a more high volume basis, right? Because there's a lot of pressure on those leads that come in from kind of Google ads to, bring those home because of the cost. So, I do think like, there's a lot of benefit to getting that higher volume, lower cost sort of, growth in contacts through this sort of webinar advertising type approach. Even if, like you said, they don't attend the webinar, you've got people that at least have some form of intent, and it's what you do with those contacts, because there's a long tail. Even if people attend the webinar and don't buy immediately, that doesn't mean they're not going to buy over a 12 to 18 month time frame. You're keeping in contact with.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to kind of, get the pipeline, a more robust pipeline kind of scaled up.
Exactly. It's all about the pipeline. That's exactly what this is. It's building pipeline infrastructure. That's what this is.
Why don't you maybe tell us a little bit more about kind of, some of the SDR / outreach stuff that, this is part of your offer. If, I'm sure that you can work with MSPs if they have their own outreach people, but if those MSPs don't necessarily want to do the outreach, y'all have an outreach component as well, right?
Yeah, I can go into that a little bit. So I don't do SDRs. I don't do outreach. I never have. I've always been about inbound. Always been about people coming to me or people coming to my customers. It's never about pestering people, trying to, interrupt their day. Okay. So it's never about that. It's like, that's not a good way to start off a relationship. You just don't want to do that. And that's why, like, you look at the cold call side of things. And I mean, I think a stat that Mr. Gillette was talking about on his podcast is like something like, you'll pretty much do cold calling for an entire month to get one, like, proper, someone in the diary that's actually going to buy from you. And going to back to your point on the, the search side of things, the Google Ads side of things, that's obviously a much bigger intent. That's when people are in pain. That's when they're wanting to, when they need a new IT provider, or they're looking for that fix. So that's much further down the funnel. So from the webinar side, it's very much about, it's a digital networking tool, but it's building that pipeline. But from an SDR perspective, the way that, so to kind of take it 180 degrees from interrupting someone's day, is that basically they're interrupting my phone or one of my VA's phones. And they go, oh no, someone's registered onto our webinar. Guess what we're going to have to do now? I'm going to have to text them to say, saw you register onto the webinar. Just interested. Why did you register? What was the interest in this topic? It's about starting that conversation, and it's very much manual. It's a text, and it's just to basically find out why they registered on, to personalize the webinar for them, to warm them up, so that there's a much higher likelihood that they actually attend the webinar. So that's the SDR function here. So we've got a resource based out in Cambodia, Siem Reap, that as soon as someone registers onto the webinar, and if you follow Alex Hormozy, he says speed to lead. Within 5 to 10 minutes, they get just a little message back saying, "Hey, saw you registered on. Interested in why you registered on? How can we make this a cool webinar for you?" So, yeah, that's that. Yeah, yeah. So that's the pre SDR approach. And the post one got a framework that we use again in the texts, where we've got basically, you've got different types of contacts. So you've got the guys and girls that attended the webinar. They're obviously going to be warmer, and from an attendance report in Teams, you can see how long they stuck around for. And then you've got the guys and girls that missed the webinar for one reason or another. We've got basically a chat framework on the text, just to say, hey, how did you find the webinar? You got any back for us? And then we just go through a little bit of a chat with them. A bit like maybe your fitness influencers, where they're reaching out. Unfortunately, I mean, if you look at me, I don't follow any fitness influencers, so I haven't experienced that myself. But to say, it's one of these huge levers, like in doing content for so long. I'm like, yeah, it's like silly. Why would I not be reaching out to the people that engage in what I'm doing? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, hey, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the fitness industry because it's brutally competitive, high volume, and all that other stuff. But so I think maybe one thing I want to touch on is like what sort of frequency are you recommending for these webinars? Because this isn't something you just want to let's build up to the one big webinar and then do the one big webinar. This is something that, you want to be hosting these regularly and kind of keep the pipeline and the flywheel turning. So what sort of frequency are you recommending for these webinars for your clients? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So yeah, going back to the health and fitness guys and girls, it's very much like a muscle webinar. The more you work it out, the better it'll get. And I've been doing this, well, I can say 2.5 years now. I've been doing webinars for 12 years, but I really zoomed in 2.5 years. And I'm still learning things about webinars. And because of that, a lot will depend on where you are with your business. So, for most MSPs, it's going to be the owner, more than likely, or it's going to be the head of sales that's going to be doing the webinar. So a lot's going to, it's like, how does that schedule with your business? So what I try and do with these is, for my clients, the managed webinars, is it's almost like a black box. So they start work with me. There's maybe 2 or 3 hours worth of work where we've figured out what the presentation is going to be, what the topic's going to be, who we're looking to get to the webinar. And then we go through that a couple of times. My colleague Anne-Marie does all of that work where we actually develop the content, and she translates it from basically from that techie speak in our heads, and through our teams to actually what our customers, our prospects can actually understand. So she helps develop the presentations. But this black box approach is, once we're over that initial hurdle, you literally just have to turn up. No matter how busy your schedule is, there is at least an hour, either every month, every 2 weeks, every quarter, where you're actually coming up to the webinar and doing it. A lot will depend on where the business is. I would start with this monthly. That's what I suggest for this. I was doing it weekly, and it was too much. And the focus, there wasn't enough focus. It was more like too much of a routine, if that makes sense. To start monthly is where I place this. And there's obviously going to be seasonal components to this as well. So are you going to do a webinar in December? Well, I actually had my best webinar in December. So I probably will be doing one in December again, just based on that experience. But if I was looking at it objectively, I'd be like, no. So you're gonna have to test. I know some of the clients that I'm working with right now, they're like, yeah, July's out, Scott. Can't do July, for obvious reasons. But that's cool. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, what happened to me in December? And I'm also thinking, when I was doing IT sales back in 2012, I was still sat at my desk. I was still in the office, and I was having to try and, get the business in, have that pipeline there. And it was really difficult. So in my head, it's like, yeah, July is probably not a great month to do a webinar, but actually there's a really good reason why I should, is because of that lack of pipeline, a lack of, real world activity that's going on. You're going to capture people through the organic piece or the ads piece. You capture people there. So yeah, I would stick with monthly, and don't give yourself excuses in regards to seasonality, because the market's the market, and the only way that you're going to know what the market wants is if you actually go and do.
Hey, I've gotten some of my better leads over the years in July, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And those seasons are slow because everybody is kind of taking vacations, things like that during those time frames. But the people who aren't taking vacations over those time frames have big problems that they're willing to spend to get solved because they want to go take vacation.
Exactly. Yeah. So you just never know. So yeah.
Yeah, I like the monthly cadence. We're trying to do a few webinars over here as well. And I think a webinar is also like a really good way to kind of like, create a little bit more process and structure in your sales process. And I think that government contractor, that was one of the, best things that they had about their sales process was like, they had a clear next step of like, let's not try and get people to a sales conversation right away. Like when we've established contact, our main goal is to get them to a webinar.
Yeah.
And that helps kind of, and then like you can, do a little bit more measurability from like established contact, attended the webinar, sales demo booked, whatever it is, and then close deal from there. Whereas a lot of people kind of don't, a lot of MSPs really don't have a material mid-funnel. They, have the outbound outreach, the first touches, the cold touches, and then they might have the bottom of funnel stuff. But there really is no kind of mid-funnel, like relationship building phase, things like that. And, the webinars are great for that.
Yeah. And I would say onto that, like, this is going to, we've covered some of the registration piece and how to solve that. We haven't really touched on the attendance piece, but that third piece where it comes to what you're actually doing in the webinar, is it going to be a sales call? What's it going to be? And you go back to your government client and what they were doing. There's a few ways that you can play this. What I'm finding that's working well quite now in the webinars for my clients, yeah, we're aware that like the people coming to the webinars are probably not in a position where they're ready to switch MSP immediately. It's just not going to happen. You might get really lucky, but it's one of those things where it's part of your nurture. What we are finding that's working quite well, and this is obviously the AI opportunity, where a lot of the MSP market, the guys and girls, I haven't actually seen the opportunity. We don't understand that there's a huge opportunity right now. Whilst they're under the desks turning something on and off, there's this big AI opportunity. So the smartest clients that I've got, what they're doing is they're not actually selling managed IT services in their webinars or cybersecurity. The hot topic's AI. That gets people to the webinar because they want to see, what the cool thing is with AI. It's on everyone's tip of everyone's tongue. But more importantly, it's the Trojan horse for the managed IT services. So they go in the webinar.
I like that.
They have it's three options. It's like a packet, three different packages that got three offers. There's a free offer. There's like a low ticket offer, and then there's a higher engagement offer all around AI. And that is getting a lot of what's the word? It's working very well. And it basically, because they're putting this offer in their webinar and they're taking up, a small Trojan horse AI project, that one project at like $3,000 or whatever is paying for the ads. It's paying for Scott and Anne Marie and IT Rockstars. It's paying for the whole pipeline. And it's also their foot in the door. So once they've done a great job on that AI project, the Trojan horse, that's when they can start the conversation about, let's have a look at what your IT people are actually doing. Are you actually secure? That's what's working right now. So it's not about selling the managed IT services. It's very much taking a different approach and looking at what people are actually, what they want, not necessarily what they need, but what they want, and then giving them what they need later on.
Yeah, that's great, and it solves a problem a lot of MSPs have, in that they just kind of can't afford to grow in some cases. They kind of pipeline that's like multi-channel and full funnel is just not something that they can kind of afford. So like having a way to build these relationships, way to generate these leads in a way that can recoup the cost of generating them in the near term is one of the biggest challenges many businesses face, not just MSPs, but certainly in the MSP sector. I think that's one of the reasons Hormozy has been very popular, is because he's a big advocate of kind of taking that approach with like a larger fixed fee kind of upfront projects that you can you sell that and recoup your customer acquisition costs. So
you give them an offer that's they would be stupid to refuse. Yeah, that's why they feel stupid refusing. So yeah, that's exactly what it's about.
Okay, well, I know we're kind of running up on our time here, so we might have to get you back for a future episode to tell us a little bit more about running the actual webinars. But I think it covered some good stuff here with how to kind of acquire the leads and follow up and kind of get the pipeline element full. So definitely reach out to Scott here if you want to talk with him and brainstorm a little bit more about running your specific webinar or coming up with content. I'm sure he's got a lot of great things to say there. We'll definitely get his information in the show notes for you. Scott, anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
Yeah, it's not about the webinar. It's about building a sales pipeline for you guys and girls out there. So, yeah, check me out. We've got a book, Hunter, that you're in. Should maybe mention it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have that citation in the book? It's called Virtually Irresistible. You can find it in all good bookstores. But it's the MSP's Guide to Webinars. So that's where I would start with this. It's the mechanics, though. It's just like all the things that we've kind of already covered. The thing that we haven't covered is what you do in the webinar and how it's delivered. But that's for another episode.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Take a look at the book, again, Virtually Irresistible, MSP's Guide to Webinars, and check out Scott with IT Rockstars. Scott, thank you for joining the podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Hunter.